Morning. Hope you guys are doing well this morning. This morning I was just going to tell a story to illustrate a truth about salvation. Back in the 1800s, there was around this town where there was a big steel mill. There was railroad tracks and there was also a couple of rivers, and they moved a lot of iron ore in and out of the steel mills by rail and also by big barge. And there was a big train trestle going across the river, and it had to be able to be opened to allow the big barges to come through full of the ore. And there was a keeper of the trestle. He had a little shanty up above the thing, and he lived in this little town, and he and his wife had tried for years to have kids. They couldn't have any children, and finally his wife was able to conceive, and they had a son, and that son brought a lot of joy into his life, and it meant everything to the man. He got so much pleasure from spending time with his son, and when the son got to be about 8 years old, he would ask if he could go to work with his father. His father watched the bridge, the trestle, in the evenings usually, all night. And one day he gave in and allowed his son to come with him. And the boy always liked to climb, loved to climb. And his father had opened up the trestle to allow some barges to come through, and a big passenger train, which was a really long one that hauled a lot of passengers, would come through at a certain time. And when the train got to a certain point in the track, a telegraph message would come, say, hey, if you got that open, the trestle open, you better spin it back around so the train can come across. So that was his job. He had to do that. Well, this one day, when the man wasn't looking, he was occupied with something, the son had gone out and climbed down, had gone out of that little shanty that the guy had, the control booth, whatever you want to call it, that was up above his trestle, and climbed down there and just loving to explore. And he was climbing around on things, and the man got the telegraph message that he needed to spin that trestle around so the train could come across safely. The barges had all gone through, and there was no reason not to. So he turned around, looked to his son to tell him that he was getting ready to pull the lever and start the big mechanism that would spin the trestle back in positions for the train to cross. Well, he didn't see his son in the shanty anywhere, and he panicked. He looked, he saw the door was a little bit ajar, and he was very distraught. He went out and looked out the windows, and he couldn't find his son. Looked out the door, and he had to pull this lever soon. Had to pull it right then to put the trestle in position so that the train could cross, because there's no way to get a message to the train to stop, that the trestle would not be in position. So he looked and looked for his son, and to his horror, his 8-year-old son, his only beloved son, that him and his wife finally got in their old age, was out there climbing on the huge gears of the mechanism that would rotate this train trestle back into position for the train to cross. And, in a situation like that, your brain goes into high gear trying to think of any possible way, any solution to the thing to keep his son from being crushed by this mechanism when he throws it into gear. And he called his son in desperation to quick come back. But it was too far. There's no way the child couldn't do it. He wasn't paying attention to his father anyhow. It was loud, and he was unable to get his son's attention and call him back. And even if he could, it was too far to climb around on the thing. He wouldn't be out of the way soon enough. So the man finally realized the only way he could save all them people on that train was to throw that lever, which would kill his son. He'd be crushed in the big mechanism, those huge gears that would move the trestle around in position for the train to cross. So he, in great agony, knowing that's the only choice he had, he sacrificed the life of his only son, pulled that lever, swung the trestle back into position so the train could cross safely, and he preserved all those people's lives that would have been lost if he'd have been selfish, and in order to save his son, caused that train to plunge down into the river and killed who knows how many people. It was a terrible, terrible decision. No parent should ever have to make a decision like that. It was horrible, but it was the only way that he could save the lives of people on that train. Now, I'll tell you that story to illustrate that a lot of people think there's more than one way to salvation. A lot of people think that you can get to heaven by various different means, different religions. But the Bible says that God sent his only Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Jesus said that he was the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh to the Father but by him. God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish. His only Son. Now, do you think if there was any other way that God would have killed his own Son, his only Son? If there was other ways to heaven, other ways to salvation? I don't think so. The sacrificial death of Christ on that cross, his shed blood, his living the sinless life and accepting the punishment for our sin, God allowing his one beloved Son to be killed, to suffer, shed his blood, and die on that cross is the only way to heaven, the only way to salvation. Again, if it was any other way, why would God kill his Son? Just wanted to illustrate that. I think Satan gets a lot of traction from the lie that there's other ways to salvation. Anyhow, hope you have a blessed Sunday. Sorry if it's a little bit of a downer to you, but should not be a downer. Should be a great joy knowing that God loved you so much that he would sacrifice his son so that you could live. Anyhow, have a great Sunday. We'll see you. Bye.